Good afternoon. I hope that you can all hear me. If not, adjust the volume or send me a message through the questions and I'll adjust mine. I'm Dr. Sharon Milgram and I direct the NIH Office of Intramural Training and Education, and I'm offering this webinar today from my house in Tacoma Park, Maryland, right on the edge of Washington, D.C. and close by the main campus of the National Institutes of Health. I'm hoping that all of you are safe and well and sheltering in place, and that you have heard lots of positive good news from your family and friends and people that you love, that they too are safe and well during these hard times. You know, one of the things that's important for us in the middle of all of this stress and unknown and difficulty is to keep sight of the future. Yes, we're in a period of intense discomfort and some things are on hold, but in general, I mean, the honest truth is our lives might feel that they're completely on hold, but we are planning for the future. And so in that vein of looking forward to the future, I am pleased to offer this workshop on making a successful transition to graduate school. Just a couple of notes. The slides in PDF form are in the handouts box. If something went wrong and you can't download them or have access to them, afterward, you'll get an email from one of the OITE staff and you'll be able to get them again then. If you have any problems with the slides freezing, it's likely your setup. No worries. Log out, log back in, and hopefully it will pick up. And if not, we're taping this and the taped version should be up really shortly after we're done. And likewise, if your audio freezes, same thing. The only way to participate in this workshop is online. There's no call-in number. Just back out, quit, and come back in, and hopefully it'll solve the problem. I'll take questions at some times throughout, but to help us get through as many questions as possible, I'm going to ask that you not type in questions as I go along, and then I see them scrolling, I get distracted, and I can't find where did I get to, you know, what question am I up to. So I'll pause and say, ask your questions now, and then you'll be able to type them in, and I'll do my best to answer as many questions as I possibly can. And if I can't answer them all, I'm always available online, and you can reach out with specific questions. So let me just start with this and say that's Teo. He's sitting right here on the floor. This picture is from the other day, but pretty much since I started working from home, Teo too has started working from home. Teo has no inside voice. So when Teo barks, Teo really barks. So he apologizes in advance for the barking. And if that happens, we'll just have to pause for a moment. If my wife can step in and help, she will. And if not, I'll step out of the workshop for a moment, get him a treat, and we'll keep going. So that's my one warning in advance. So in thinking about graduate school and a transition to graduate school, and I know some people on this webinar are in their first year, but there's still lots of new about this. And so it still, I think, really applies. When you think about this transition into grad school or from the academic portion of grad school into the more research focused as you transition and join a lab, you realize there's really a lot to focus on and think about and hold together. You know, we got to take care of ourselves. We have to focus on our academics. We have to focus on our science and what we're learning and needing to accomplish to be successful in the research space. And the honest truth is, in the long term, we're in grad school to take care of our career and to have the kind of career that we wish to have. And so we really want to focus throughout and keep in mind all of these topics. We have to take care of ourselves, our academics, our science, and our career. And I'm going to ask you to consider this really simple question, want to thrive. And I know sometimes people say, like, let's survive grad school. Here are 10 tips for surviving grad school. We don't really want to survive. We really want to thrive. And so if you want to thrive, I'm going to encourage you to wrap your head around this statement. Then you come first. Taking care of you comes first. Not learning techniques, not signing up for rotations, not making sure that you are enrolled in particular classes. We're going to start this discussion from you, because it is really you who is going to need to deal with the ups and downs of all of this. A lot of times when I talk to students, I see them at the beginning and we talk about how exciting it is. And then I talk to them towards the end, and obviously then it's extremely exciting. And even during all of the craziness of this pandemic, I know of 4 or 5 graduate students who successfully defended their PhDs. And although they all say, oh, it was sort of a letdown in the moment, the honest truth is that it's just one of these amazing high energy excitement moments. But in the middle, it's like being in the middle of a tunnel where there's not very much light. You can't look behind and see that excitement of the beginning, and you can't look ahead and see that excitement of the defense and what comes next. And so to make it through that really long process of graduate school means that you got to put yourself first. So that's where we're going to start. And I'm going to ask you, as you think about taking care of yourself, to reflect on a couple of things. What really energizes, nurtures, and sustains you. And that relates and ties together with focusing on your most important non-work activities and hobbies. That could be all kinds of things. Each of you are different. Some of you have family responsibilities. Some of you have family that's quite a distance away, and your biggest way of getting energy and nurturing from that will be to set up all kinds of good ways to communicate at a distance. But those are the first 2 things to think about. What is it that when the going gets tough, I turn to in a healthy, positive way? My non-work activities and hobbies that nurture and sustain me. The other thing you want to do to really prepare for this, and as you're in it, is to really pay attention to how you deal with stress. And I want to define 2 kinds of stress: eustress and distress. So eustress is the good kind of stress. It feels within our coping abilities. It feels doable and it's energizing. You can think of it as you've prepared really well for an exam. You know the material. You feel really good about it, but you're still nervous about it. That kind of copable, manageable stress is called eustress. Distress is when we've been sitting with stress for a long period of time. It's really weighing on us. It feels way outside our coping mechanisms and comfort zone. It is totally disheartening and makes us want to just give up. We need to know our stress response so that we can stay and hold on to eustress as we're preparing for things and dealing with difficult challenges, and so we can really manage stress so that it doesn't become distress and chronic stress. Each of us has our own signature stress response, and each of us has elements of that stress response that are functional, that really help us manage, right? But we also have some that are really dysfunctional. One's approaches, behaviors, thoughts that don't help any. If anything, they dump stress onto more stress. So we need to know our stress signals. We need to know our stress habits. We need to understand the difference between good stress, bad stress, and chronic stress. To take care of yourself, you also need to think about your resilience and how you stay resilient in the face of challenges and setbacks and disappointments. And a part of staying resilient is understanding our stress response, the self-awareness to know how we deal with stress, and the self-awareness to have tools to deal with it. And so these are really linked together. Another big part of resilience that's linked together is that we need to understand our self-doubts and our head tapes, or our inner voice or inner critic. And there are two concepts around this that I really want to make sure that you understand. I won't be really addressing them very much today. I would be referring you to other workshops to learn about them. But much of our self-doubt and our head tapes, those stories we tell ourselves when we're stressed and when we hit a setback and face disappointment, most of those stories are exaggerated and negative. And that's because of that our brain is hardwired to look for negativity, not to look for positivity. Our brain is hardwired to keep us safe, and so it's constantly looking ahead at what might put us into danger. That the fact that our brain does that drives this distorted thinking, or things known as cognitive distortions, and they make us catastrophize, and they make us feel like things are way worse than they actually are. One part of resilience is understanding your cognitive distortions and learning how to deal with them. The other thing, a special flavor of cognitive distortions that really gets in the way for graduate students and postdocs, and can really, really come up as we make new transitions, are imposter fears. And if you think about it, the start of graduate school is all about transitions. We move often to a new place, a new school, a new program. We do rotations, we have new teachers. We rotate in one place and we feel pretty good, but then we have to rotate somewhere else and suddenly we don't feel so good again. We reach the end of the first year, we have to join a research group. It's just one transition after another. And the cognitive distortion of minimizing drives imposter fears during these transitions. And again, I have a lot to say about imposter fears and some of the other resources I'll point you to, but I think it is such a part of the graduate school experience that we all need to expect them. We all need to talk about them. We all need to learn to support ourselves and each other through them. And I'm sure lots of you have heard about imposter syndrome, imposter phenomenon. I just like to call it imposter fears, to make the point that these are a normal, healthy response to being in a high knowledge environment. Imposter fears cause really successful individuals like each of you who's preparing to start grad school or preparing to move into the lab and intense research phase of grad school. It causes successful individuals like you to believe that your success and accomplishments are actually the result of luck or external circumstance. It leads you to ignore all of your strengths and to focus largely on your weaknesses and liabilities. Imposter fears make us feel like we don't belong. They make us feel like we want to hide. And in general, there are three basic signs. If you tend to think and feel that you fooled others into overestimating your ability, so you arrive on campus, you go to orientation, and you look around and you're like, oh, I wasn't meant to get in. I just got in because I fooled them during my interview. Or you attribute your success to luck and other factors except for your intelligence or ability. Oh, I was lucky. There must have been a weak group of applicants this year. And then finally, the other sign of imposter fears is that you fear being exposed as a fraud. So, okay, you got in, right? Or this lab decided to take you, right? Okay, that happened, but the minute I speak up again, they'll realize I don't belong. And because of that, I'll be asked to leave. And because of that feeling of being exposed as a fraud, because we're so afraid of that, we tend not to speak up. So imposter fears really can get in the way. And this is really an important thing to understand, is we all feel imposter fears at many, many points in our educational and career journeys. And I thought that I would borrow this quote from Maya Angelou, one of the most influential poets and writers of our time. And she says, I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find me out now. And I think that this, in many, many ways, is something we need to keep in mind. First of all, so that we don't have shame about our imposter fears. Second of all, so that we feel empowered to talk about them with others. so that we can think about them proactively, support ourselves when we feel them, support others when they share them with us. And so I think it's really, really important as you're thinking about your resilience at the start to think about cognitive distortions and imposter fears. And then finally, one last thing before we dive into the details of getting started, and that is to remember that mindset matters. And I really, really love this, because really graduate school and a life in science, whether that be at the bench, away from the bench, in industry, in government, in academia, a life in science is to be constantly learning. And lifelong learners really need to remember how important it is to keep what we call a growth mindset. So this is the work of Dr. Carol Dweck, an educational psychologist from Stanford University, and I gave you some links to her online resources. You can also find her book in most libraries, and you can find her TED Talks pretty easily. But she talks about how our mindset really drives our view of learning. And I'm going to just use the example of math, because I would say that I struggle a bit with my mindset about my math skills. And certainly in grad school, as you'll see at the end of the talk, when I tell you end with a story about grad school, you'll see that math loomed large for me throughout graduate school. So just imagine saying, oh, I'm not good at math. That really doesn't leave you much place to work, to learn, to grow. It feels pretty disheartening. I'm not good at it. Oh, well, let me give up. That's called a fixed mindset, or having a fixed mindset. But let's just add one simple word, yet. Oh, I'm not good at math yet. That's a growth mindset. That's a mindset where we acknowledge that we can learn and grow. In fact, the hallmark of a growth mindset is actually acknowledging that we can grow and learn, whether things come easily to us or not. And the first thing that you'll come to appreciate in grad school is some things will come much easier for you than other things will. And your friends, they'll have different things that come easy for them, but they'll also have different things that don't come easy. We are all a mix of talent that can be developed, and sometimes we start with some innate ability in an area, or we start with a little more background in an area. So sometimes we start all the way at the beginning. Sometimes we're a little bit ahead of the curve. People with a growth mindset believe that they can grow and learn, whether they're ahead of the curve, behind the curve, whether it comes easy or it doesn't come so easy. That's the first thing about having a growth mindset. And graduate school is all about first experiences, second learning, growing. My last talk was at a small meeting. This talk is at a really large meeting. It's just all about new experiences and growing and learning. So we really need a growth mindset. People with a growth mindset ask for help and use resources to promote learning. One of the real issues with imposter fears is because we're worried about being exposed as a fraud, we don't ask for help. And that works against us. So we want to always have our growth mindset view of everyone needs help and resources are a way for me to get ahead. People with a growth mindset explore new approaches and new ways of tackling problems, especially when they get stuck. So we don't just keep trying things exactly the same way. It doesn't work, we give up. We try it again. If it doesn't work, we say, is there a new way of doing this? A hallmark of a growth mindset is acknowledging and embracing our weaknesses, especially when they're barriers to our success. We don't have to embrace every weakness. Some of them we can let go of and say, well, that's just not my thing. But there are some things that are really critical to our success in grad school and beyond. And if that's something that is a little bit of a weakness for us at the start, we have to tackle it and embrace it and work on it. People with a growth mindset focus on process and not only on outcome. By process, I mean the steps along the way. Perhaps it's about a first year course and you really hope to get an A and you were a little bit disappointed with your B minus. So that's the outcome, the B minus, or maybe it's even a worse grade than that, right? But that's the outcome. The process is, how did you study, right? And maybe there was actually some positive things there. You were hesitant to join a study group, but you did. You went for office hours. Yeah, maybe you should have gone earlier, right, and more often, but you went. So you focus not only on the outcome, but also on the process. People with a growth mindset learn from mistakes and they develop skills for giving, but especially for receiving feedback. That is a whole lot to look at just on that one slide. And if you think about it, the whole concept of cognitive distortions and imposter fears is a whole lot to take in, as is the whole concept of actually taking care of ourselves and managing our stress. So I feel like I just gave you a whole lot to work on. All of that comes together under the rubric of developing our resilience. Resilience is the capacity to rise above adversity and forge a lasting strength through all of the struggle. To be resilient, we have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe that bad times are temporary. And we have to believe that we're going to learn something through the struggle. And in some ways right now, this really applies to the current situation that we're all in. So in fact, we're practicing resilience as we practice moving ahead through these challenging times. And grad school will just be a different set of challenges. And so you'll want to develop your academic resilience as you move through it. We cultivate resilience by taking care of ourselves, by being self-aware and developing our emotional intelligence. We have to understand when we're frustrated, when we're angry, when we're upset, and when we're sad, so that we can address all of those emotions as they drive our behaviors or don't drive behaviors that would be really beneficial for us. Resilience is cultivated by using resources, and like I said, learning to recognize and engage with our negative self-talk. And so I just wanted to give you one takeaway message and 3 resources for this. Resilience is people plus process plus preparation. It's having mentors and peers who support us. It's process, how we reach out for resources, what resources we use, how we engage with our negative self-talk, how we address our imposter fears, etc., plus preparation. That's doing all of the wellness things we need to do to be resilient when we need to be. People plus process plus preparation. There are 2 good videos that I can refer you to. One is Becoming a Resilient Scientist, and the other is Becoming a Resilient Scientist Pandemic Edition. The links are here. There are many other resources, I'm sure, at your universities and through other excellent organizations. But I'm going to just refer you to these that come from the NIH. In addition, if you want to address this part of the talk in the next few weeks, the NIH OITE will offer a wellness and stress management for scientists workshop very soon. And I will be offering 2 more workshops during this shelter-in-place period. One is called Developing Feedback Resilience, which I'm still developing. It's a work in progress, but I hope to offer it next week. And the other is Self-Advocacy for Graduate Students and Postdocs, and that's on being assertive and setting healthy boundaries for yourself and with your mentors and PIs. For those of you at NIH, I know there's a lot of NIH postbacks on this call. You are also welcome to attend our OITE resilience discussion groups and other small group wellness activities. For those of you at other schools, I'm sure your campuses have similar things, and if you have questions about them, feel free to reach out to me. And so with that short, but I think really important introduction to resilience and wellness and stress management, I want to transition into the actual meat of this talk on transitioning successfully to grad school. But I want to say one thing on the way, and that is that the material about resilience and wellness and assertiveness and stress management, those are at the heart of success in grad school. I think that many times when I sit in my office with a student that's really struggling, all of the struggles come as we go through the layers and layers involved. A lot of it comes down to how we view ourselves, how we take care of ourselves, how we manage stress and anxiety. And so I really want to encourage you to look at the beginning of this talk, follow those links, and take care of yourself. Those are the skills that you will use every day. So with that introduction, 3 things about your transition. So if you're a college senior now or an NIH postbac, before you start grad school, take a vacation. Do not let someone convince you to work up until the last day. We all need to recharge our batteries. We all need to pause and slow down. And I think this year more than ever, that's true. While I've heard the word staycation used a lot about this quarantine period and shelter in place period, the honest truth is that we are in the midst of an unprecedented and difficult time for ourselves, for our families, our communities, our countries, for the world. And so we're all going to need to take a pause and a break after all of this. But the transition from undergrad or postbac to grad school, that really warrants even an additional vacation time. If you are a first-year student, when you wrap up your classes before you start in the lab, take a vacation. Same thing. You're going from one intense time to another intense time, and all of you are doing this with the backdrop of grief and pain of this pandemic. So take a vacation, do some things fun. You know, visiting with family can be a vacation, or it can just be visiting with family, right? It's something important. It can be positive and nurturing, but it's not always relaxing. So do both. Take a vacation and visit with important people in your life. I also encourage you to move well in advance of the start of grad school for those of you getting set to enter your first year so that you can get settled. And I know schools have put off summer rotations, so there will be lots of nuance this year, but still don't arrive on Friday to start orientation on Monday. It's just not enough time to get settled. And then the third thing, and you know, I give this advice when I talk to grad students heading out for postdocs, or their first job, and I give it to people in my making the transition from postdoc to your career. So I give this advice to everyone, and that is get personal details out of the way before things start. And that way you can focus on settling into your new program or new research group. And we do all have to take care of the personal details to get off to a good beginning. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that. So settling into your new life. So first and foremost, that's really highly dependent on what settled means to you. So, you know, I never work from home. I'm not a big fan of telework. And then I arrived here one day with my laptop and an extra bag of books saying, okay, starting on Monday, I'm going to be teleworking. And our son moved out recently, so you know, his room is sort of available, and I moved in there and I put some things down and I didn't unpack anything, and I opened my laptop and I said, okay, I'm settled. So to me, settled doesn't mean having to put everything away and in its place. But to some people, settled would mean coming home, moving into that room, getting things set up, dealing with the lighting, dealing with making sure that everything that you need is set up really efficiently. In fact, my wife said, we need to get this set up because settled for her is different than settled for me. Same thing for you as you move. Some of you will really want to nest and get everything set up. Some of you might need a little bit less of that, but we all need to feel settled. I suggest using networks to get input in advance for really important decisions. Like you don't want to rent an apartment and it turns out to be a very difficult commute or not the safest or best neighborhood for you. So use networks to get input in advance for things that are really important. I like to encourage people when they think about settling to borrow from the OITE's 4 quadrants of wellness perspective. So in the wellness workshop, which I hope you all will join, you'll learn that there's really 4 areas or 4 quadrants of wellness that we need to focus on: our body, our heart, our mind, and our spirit. And I think if you think about moving and getting set in your new life from that perspective, it makes it really easy to think about, what do I need to really feel good in my new place, right? So for me, body, I have some things I really like to do exercise-wise that are very important to me, but that's also about shopping, right? Some of you might need halal meat or kosher meat, or you might be vegan and want to know where the best health food store is. Same thing for heart and mind and spirit. You'll want to think, what is it that I use and need now, because I'm likely to use and need them moving forward, right? So in terms of spirit, that could be nature for some of us, but that could be a synagogue, a mosque, a church. It can be different things for each of us. Around heart and mind, those can be things around our hobbies, but it can also be things about our mental and emotional health. If you have a therapist now, it's likely that having a therapist through that transition will help you a lot. And so you should find one before you leave. The beauty is you can talk to your current therapist, let him or her know where you're going, talk about what you're looking for, and they can advise you. Also, your student health center can advise you. Maybe there are people in your program that can advise you. But I love thinking about moving and settling from this 4-quadrant approach, because it makes us think about our entire being, not just a part of our being. And just remember that your university and program can really help. Student health services, career services, the rec center, any clubs and student groups that are important. Make sure you understand your student health insurance in advance. One thing you don't want to do is be understanding all of that in the middle of a health emergency. And so you should take care of all of that in advance. That's what I mean by settling into your new life. That doesn't have to take a lot of time, and you can just use a little bit of time each day to sort of work through all of this. But most of us are happier when we know where we want to shop, and when we can find things that nurture our hobbies, when we can take care of ourselves, when we know how to get to work, when we know how long that's going to take, and we can figure things out. So that's what I mean by settling into your life. And so with that, I want to go now from you into a little bit more about settling into your grad school life. And before we do that, I'm going to pause right here and take any questions that you might have. So there's a question about resources at other people's schools as opposed to OITE resources. This one is in particular about Canada, but there's another one from students in other places as well. Most schools have a director of graduate studies and a graduate career office that is available to help you and support you through this transition. In fact, for those of you thinking about which school, you have multiple offers and you're thinking which one to accept, I think looking at those resources is a good way to compare schools. It's not the only thing you would look at, but it's an important thing to consider. And if you're not sure of where those resources are at your school, go to the graduate school or go to the director of your program and ask about it. The OITE resources, a lot of the resources we have available for our trainees are also available online, and you can look at that. The AAMC GREAT Group for graduate research, education, and training group, they have resources. Norman, which is the National Research Mentor Network, has resources, and there are a variety of national resources, and I'll have a lot to say about that later. There's a question about dealing with advisors who are opposed to you taking self-care time, vacation time, or visiting families. You know, if that's from somebody currently rotating with PIs, I think you want to pay attention to that, because we all need vacations and self-care. You don't want to work for somebody who can't find any space for that. If you are an NIH postbac, a college senior, and you're currently working in a lab, or you're a postbac somewhere else, remember you're coming close to the end, and it's reasonable to practice some assertiveness in this in this regard. For one thing, you'll need assertiveness skills as you get to graduate school. And so practicing now is an important thing. Also, you're coming towards the end, and if there's really a problem, hopefully it's right towards the end of things and easier to deal with sort of the consequences of setting a healthy boundary. But it is critically important that you find a way to take time off. There's a question from Jody. Is there a postbac alumni network where we can ask previous postbacs about their current institutions? There are, if you go on the NIH OITE webpage, is an alumni database. Also, if you're going to a school and you want input, and I'm going to talk a lot about talking to students and getting input from them, ask the director of graduate studies to put you in touch with some more senior students, or remember the people that you met at your interview and reach out to them. There's some really, that's a great way to learn about things in the neighborhood. Are there any rumblings about whether grad students will still get paid in the fall, even if classes, rotations, and such are delayed? Every conversation that I have been involved in has focused on supporting our students and postdocs through all of this. We fully expect to continue supporting all of you through all of this, and I encourage you to take a deep breath and appreciate that we are all in this together. The scientific enterprise is greatly, desperately needed, and this pandemic is just an example of that. And while I have no magic wand to wave and promise that you will still get paid, I think that it is very, very safe to assume that the graduate enterprise will continue. This is just a question from Emmanuel about wanting to go over the material later. And yes, this will be taped and you can come back in and watch it. All right, I'm going to pause for 1 second and make sure there are no other questions. All right, so let's start now and hear from some grad students. So this comes from my work first at UNC Chapel Hill and now at NIH. Just summarizing, I don't know, the tens of thousands of stories about what grad students say about grad school, and they are, of course, the experts. What I remember about grad school, not so helpful anymore. It was a very long time ago. So they say there are 3 things to keep in mind. There is a complete lack of structure, and that can be very challenging. Those of you who took a gap year or 2 and are working as a postbac may feel a little bit of that lack of structure now, and so you have some use, you're a little bit used to it. Those of you in school, depending on how your last year has been, you may also have some sense already of that lack of structure, but that can be really challenging. There's no beginning, middle, and end. There's no, there are milestones, but they're not often rigidly tracked, and it can just grow and stretch. And it's like, I should have had a committee meeting, but I haven't had a committee meeting. Oh, I'll have it soon, right? That lack of structure can be really challenging. The other thing is that we really expect students to be independent. And I say often with a big but, because sometimes we really want you to check in, whether that be in your lab before you do a really expensive experiment, or with your program director before you say yes to some opportunity or decide to submit some grant. So we want to see really self-directed, independent students, but we want them to be able to balance that self-direction and independence with an intuitive sense of when to ask first. And then the third thing is feedback is infrequent and it is often very critical. Scientists of my generation had very little to no training in how to manage people and how to give feedback and how to motivate teams. And some of us have learned very, very bad behaviors and bad strategies. On top of that, to be successful in science means to have critiqued your own work and to have been critiqued a lot. And so we have developed this incredible sort of comfort with critique and critical input. And as a result, we tend to give feedback that can be rather harsh and critical, sometimes incredibly helpful, right? And so if we can hold on to our growth mindset in the face of the feedback, we can really learn and grow. The other thing is that when it's not critical, it can be infrequent, right? Or it will be both, very infrequent and then very critical. And so it's important to keep that in mind. So those three things then mean that you need to keep in mind these things. Self-directed students succeed, passive students often struggle. So you'll want to really look at how you self-motivate and how you direct yourself and work independently. But remember, we said independence with the caveat that you need advice and input from program directors, other students, people in your research group, your PIs, your committee members, etc. So therefore, number 2 is that you have to work hard to develop good relationships, to know who to ask, and to identify support structures. And the key thing there is to do that early on, not the first time you struggle. So you want to be developing the people part of resilience equals people plus process plus preparation. You want to be developing those relationships, the people part, early on. And then finally, the last thing that students want you to hear from their collective wisdom is picking the right mentor is the single most important decision you will make. And this is so important that I gave it its own slide. I cannot stress enough the importance of carefully picking a mentor who will guide your science and your career and who will support you. Notice I didn't say pick a mentor who does great science. Okay, hard stop, end there. It is science, career, and you. And picking someone who will support you in every way, someone who will remind you it's time to take a vacation, someone who will model good behavior and take a vacation themselves. It is that person who is the right mentor for you. Someone who will support your whole being, not just your hands with pipettes or hands with keyboards. All right? And we're going to come back to that in a little while. All right, because I think it's so important. All right, so that's a little bit about what students say. Now let's dive deep. So let's talk about settling into your new program or your to-do list. And you know, a lot of times when I give this talk, there's first-year students and they say, oh, I didn't do that. How can I make up for these things? Do it now, right? Just do it whenever you're ready, and the earlier the better. So first and foremost, sometimes it's overwhelming at the start. There's this event and that event and this orientation. Attend all of them, all right? Because you want to meet people, as many people as you can. You want to make friends. You want to start to engage in campus life, program life, student life. So as you're at all these events, you want to meet faculty, the grad program leadership, students. You want to find the administrators, the people who make sure your pay is happening, who make sure you're registered for classes. Those are incredibly important people, and you want to make sure to get to know them. You want to put all these people's email addresses into your contacts so that their emails don't go into the spam folder, and you want to treat their emails as important. If somebody says you have to register by August 1, rest assured you really have to register by August 1. It's not like a soft suggestion. And you will make your life easier and their life easier if you meet them early, get to know them early, and listen to what they have to say. You want to make sure you clearly understand program requirements. Maybe you heard something during recruiting that you remembered in a slightly off way, and you have a different view of teaching requirements. Maybe something in the program requirements have changed a little bit. Make sure you clearly understand them. So many times students come to me at the end of their second year, and they're all frustrated because it turns out there's one class they didn't get out of the way or one requirement they didn't finish, and they're like, I don't want to do this now, right? So make sure you clearly understand the requirements so you can get them out of the way. When you're choosing classes and courses, if you have flexibility, some programs have a core curriculum at the beginning and then added flexibility. Whenever you have flexibility, choose your courses keeping in mind three things: requirements, your gaps, and your passions. I've seen students only address their passions. These are the things I really, really want to learn, but then they have to take a qualifying exam and there's a gap and they haven't filled it at all. And I've seen people do it the other way, especially if you're feeling a lot of imposter fears and your self-confidence has sort of escaped you at the moment. You're like, oh, I need to review this. I need help in that. And then you don't address your passions. And we need a combination of our passions and our gaps. And we always want to keep an eye towards requirements as we're doing that. This is a great thing to talk over with your director of graduate studies, a great thing to talk over with some senior students who are clearly thriving in the program, a great thing to talk over with the people you're thinking of rotating with. You know, if they have no interest for talking with you about classes, then they're not going to have so much interest in the long term in talking with you about other important things. And even if they're not totally an expert in those courses, they must have opinions about things that are important for you to learn. So this is a way for you to check them out as mentors. You should solidify your choices for rotations while keeping an open mind. Sometimes I talk to students who say, I'm doing this, this, and this. Those are my 3 rotations. I've set them up. It's all done. That doesn't leave any room for your passions to grow and change. And rest assured that you'll hear a seminar that piques your interest, or in a class, someone will put up a model and you'll say, wow, I want to learn more about this. You know, we only know what we know coming into grad school. And that first year is such an explosion of knowing and learning that you want to, at least if possible, keep an open mind about rotations. And then finally, in terms of setting into your new program, you want to find the counseling and career centers, the rec center, and any other important resources. You want to know where all of those things are, how to make appointments, and you want to start using those resources right at the start. Some hints and things to keep in mind about all of that: study groups and any other accountability buddy strategies that you have go a long way towards that feeling of overwhelm, that feeling of too much to do, that feeling of imposter fear, so I'll just hide. Study groups where you can get a little bit of support but also structure can be a really important first year and second year student strategy. Accountability buddies could be around studying, they could be around exercise. You know, this morning I woke up a little bit before my alarm went off, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna push my alarm back and I'm gonna stay in bed. And then I remembered that Lisa Kiley is waiting for me. So Lisa is my exercise accountability buddy. She says I'm hers, but the honest truth is that she's mine. And I got up and I got out and we did our 4 miles, physically distanced by 6 feet, while we chatted about things. So you need accountability buddies too. And the data show, when you look at wellness strategies, that having an accountability buddy can help a lot. You know, we are all a mix of different identities, and the second bullet relates to that. Find affinity groups and student clubs that stroke and nurture all of those identities. So maybe we need to find the soccer club, and maybe we need to find the Muslim Student Association, the LGBTQ student group, the group for students of color, women in science, people who like to get together and run, people who like to go rock climbing. Some of them are really about identities that we nurture and hold. Some of them are about hobbies that we nurture and hold. But I think it's really important to find all of that and get set with that as early as you can. And you know what? If there's a group that you wish was there, someday start it. Maybe not right in year one. In fact, I'm going to say probably not in year one. Go to your director of graduate studies and say, is there this resource or that resource, this student group or that student group, and get some help. Whatever you do in finding these groups, don't take a heavy leadership role or any leadership role right at the start. You want to do that after you've conquered your classes, gotten settled, and are off to a good start. But it's important to find these groups, whether they are about our deeply held identities, where it can be very relaxing and very important to have a safe place to talk about how those identities impact our feelings around our school and program, or a hobby. Either one, we really need both. I talked already about reaching out and using resources, but I can't stress, get help and advice sooner rather than later. And in that, that also means talking to successful students who already know how the system works. That's also talking to directors of graduate study, faculty members, senior leadership in the graduate program. And the reason I want you to keep that in mind, and I stress sooner rather than later, is this principle of confirmation bias. All right. So confirmation bias means we only look for data that confirms an opinion we already have, and we discount data that opposes that opinion. So if I'm the director of a graduate program and I form an opinion that a student is really proactive and a go-getter and thoughtful and hardworking, and they pay attention and they listen and they answer my emails, and then they slack off at some time or something happens that doesn't fit that model, I just say, oh, they had a bad day. All right. But if I form an opinion of a student, oh, maybe we made a mistake in making an offer to this student. They haven't been very proactive. They're not very self-directed. They're on their phone a lot during orientation. They didn't set up their meeting with me. I don't think this is a strong graduate student. Then I'm going to constantly be looking for data to confirm that bias, that they're not a great student. Meaning, first intentions, first impressions, not first intentions, first impressions form quickly and they can be hard to change. So you want to get help and advice early on so that you make good decisions early on. And then people are going to see you as the competent graduate student that you are. And when you have a bad day, they're going to say, okay, let's work this out. Not to say we can't change a negative opinion that people have of us, but it takes a lot of work, and why bother? Just do your best to get off to a good start. And then my last hint around all of this is to be kind to yourself, because most students have doubts and many experiments fail, right? And we make mistakes. And I guess I'll go back to that growth mindset again and again. The more you can keep a growth mindset, the more likely it is that you will be able to navigate all of the ups and downs, all of the bumps along the way. All right, so I'm going to pause here. There's one question, and I'll let you type in some other ones while I'm answering this one. This is from Connie. What is the best way to balance allocating courses between requirements, gaps, and passions? And I think that depends on the school, because some have a lot of requirements and you don't want to really get behind in your requirements. Beyond that, I think that the more we can address our important gaps early on, the better off we're going to be. And so I would say that a ratio, I mean, this is just me, and there are other, I noticed in the attendees, there are other program directors. It'll be interesting, maybe they'll type in their opinion. I would say maybe a ratio of 2 to 1, where you're addressing gaps to passions early on. Over time, it may be that you can do a more of a 1-to-1, but early on, especially if you're changing areas and you have a whole lot of background material to learn, a 2-to-1 ratio might be really helpful. No one's ever asked me that question, and I'm going to keep thinking about that one, and it may be that I wish to take that back. And I think the other way of dealing with that is to talk with the program director or your first year advisor, because they may have a really different view and say, you know, this is really key right now. So you'll want to get input from some other people. Another question also about a little bit of passions is a best way to spend time in areas you're passionate about while making sure your PI understands that you are devoted to the research you signed up for. And that, you know, it depends a little bit if that question is about spending time in lab and spending time outside of lab doing things that you enjoy, volunteering, going to workshops, seminars, etc. It would be really important to talk with your PI about those kinds of things and to get his or her thoughts about the best ways to balance. And if you can do that during a rotation, that's really good, because it allows you to decide, is their view of this and my view of this in sync and in alignment? So this is likely to be a relationship that works. You know, occasionally we want our PI or our boss or anyone to remind us, oh, we have to attend to important work right now. And occasionally we want them to say, well, work's important, but that's more important, go to that. And so the more you can talk with your PI about things like that, the better able you will be to assess if it's a good fit. Now, if that's about projects in the lab that you want to do, and then projects they want you to do, and there's not overlap, I would really caution against that. You want there to be a lot of overlap between your passion for experiments and their passion. Not to say they're totally overlapped, and unfortunately you can't see my hands here modeling all of this, but this should be a Venn diagram with some overlap. Both of you should care a lot about the experiments that you're doing, and then maybe you pull them in a new direction, and maybe they pull you a little bit in another direction. I'm going to talk a little bit later. Jonah asked a question about assessing young PIs as mentors, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. So I'm going to ask Jonah that you ask me that again if I don't address everything. Here's a question for a student internationally where there's no immediate support for researchers in their area. If you want information on international learning opportunities, just send me an email and with a little bit more description of what information you're looking for, and I'll point you in the right directions. All right, so I don't see any other questions there, so I'm going to go on. All right, so I'm going to talk about the next part from this topic of controlling the angst. So you're going to get overloaded. There's a lot to learn in and out of lab. We're going to start with that one, but we're going to work our way down this topic of things that grad students can have a lot of angst and stress about. So first of all, let's start with the lots to learn. There is a lot to learn in many, many different areas, and I listed just some of them now on this slide. My guess is that you could add many, many bullets to this, and all the program directors could add in bullets, and we'd have you know, maybe 20 or 30 more things. There's just a lot to learn. Science is big, right? High knowledge environments, things are constantly changing, right? We do an experiment and it leads us to have to learn something else. We learn how to write one way, and now suddenly we have to learn how to write a grant as opposed to a paper, as opposed to a paper for school, etc. So the first thing I want you to do in terms of lots to learn is first take a deep breath, because just seeing this list makes me nervous for all of you. But second, I want you to ask, how do you like to learn new things? We need to have some awareness about how we like to learn, okay? Because we want to make sure that those are ways that work for us. We want to look at what doesn't work. In terms of learning skills, start addressing some of them now. You're right, but those of you who haven't started yet, now's a great time to look at that list, and maybe you think, wow, I haven't thought much about stress management or time management, or, you know, actually I haven't given a talk in a really long time, and I'm not sure what my skills are right there in that. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to take a minute to type in a password. Okay, sorry about that. So start addressing them now. I would say the first step of addressing skills is accurate self-assessment, right? We have to know what our gaps are and what our strengths are. And sometimes we need to talk to people about that. So sit for a little bit, journal about it, think about it, talk to people about it, look at that list. What scares you? What do you see as an opportunity that you'd like to capitalize on? Remember, growth mindset. Whether it comes easy or not, you can keep growing and learning. One thing I would say for all of you is if you look at the time management and stress management bullet and say, ouch, these are not areas where I feel that I have really good strategies yet, I would tackle those first because in many ways they are keystones for everything else. We can't learn presentation skills if we're in the midst of a stress storm. Right? We can't learn presentation skills if we wait till the last minute, we don't manage our time well, and we put it all together in the last minute. And so I think in many ways, time management and stress management are what I call keystone skills. They are a foundation for developing other skills. To learn these skills, you can find and attend workshops at your school and in the community. Now is an incredible time to use online learning tools to develop in different areas. Maybe you decide you have to learn a little bit of coding before you start, or you want to learn a little bit about writing before you start. Whatever it is, there are all kinds of online resources, and as we're all at home sheltering in place, hopefully, while we have to be realistic that we're not going to get as much done as we think, hopefully each day we can get something done, right? And if that something done is forward looking and helping us for the future, I think it even helps with the stress of now. So find and attend workshops online now at your school, in the community. And if you find something not available at your school in the long term, there are books, online resources, lots of national meetings have workshops in all of these skill areas. And if there's something you really want to learn and you're not sure how to do it, ask your program director to sponsor some workshops. So looking forward into the future, see what your school offers and take advantage as best you can, and encourage them to offer things in some other areas. The thing about overload, before I move on, is I think we need to think of this as a marathon, not a sprint. We also need to appreciate that we're not going to be completely competent the first time we do something. And we have to keep reminding ourselves of that. Of course, this is hard. I'm a new graduate student. Of course, I got nervous before my seminar. I'm a new graduate student. And you want that to soften over time, but we really need to appreciate that these skills take time, really take time to learn. Now, I want to address the next two things about angst together, and that is how challenging it can be to develop quality mentoring relationships and the tensions and conflicts that we have with supervisors and mentors, and sometimes with peers, although I'll talk about supervisors and mentors for the most part here. That said, conflict management and assertiveness are two critical skills to have going into grad school, and so I encourage you to find resources in those areas. So first I want to start and define the word supervisor. A supervisor is someone who directs the work of someone else, and they are responsible for ensuring that someone does their work. At the most basic level, your thesis advisor is actually your supervisor. Now we use another word, mentor, because we hope that that relationship is actually a mentoring relationship. A mentor is someone who passes on skills, knowledge, and wisdom to another person, and someone who works to help develop the other person's career and educational trajectory. A mentor is someone who helps you develop you. A supervisor is someone who makes sure that you get work done. You want to find a lab where the person in charge becomes your mentor and who really is engaged and cares about your career development and about your science development and about your personal development. So there are two real absolute truths in all of this. And I said it already, but I'll say it again. Choosing the right dissertation lab will make or break your graduate experience. Even if the science doesn't go the way you had hoped, if you are in a mentoring, positive, nurturing environment, you will learn through graduate school and it will be a good experience. Being in the right dissertation lab with the right mentor makes all the difference. The other thing that's important to remember about this is that labs or research groups and PIs are not one size fits all. Some of us want a big group, some of us want a small group, some of us are pretty comfortable with very critical, hard feedback, and the way someone motivates us through that kind of intense feedback isn't bothersome. And for some of us, it would be hugely bothersome and get in the way. There is no right or wrong. We all are who we are with the personality and learning style that we have. There is no right or wrong, but we want to find an environment that works for us. The process of finding a research group and hopefully a thesis advisor / mentor is you have to know yourself and know your options. Many of you get to do rotations, not all of you, but if you do, that gives you a chance for real learning. You consider your options and then you choose a group. And the honest truth is it doesn't end there. Once you join a group, you'll have to make it work. Right? And that also involves knowing yourself and knowing options within all of that. So I'll come back to that maybe a little bit again at the end. When I say know yourself, I'm going to encourage you to start by reflecting on previous mentoring relationships and research environments. What worked for you, what didn't work for you, and why you think that is. Now, it's important to do that, but it's also important to keep in mind in terms of that the intensity of graduate school is different than undergraduate research, summer research experiences, and many of the postbac experiences that we have. So as we reflect on previous experiences and relationships that work, we need to appreciate that we may not be able to find exactly that we are entering a more intense experience where the expectations will grow even more. Still, start by reflecting on what really works for you. You'll want to think about your science goals, the type of work you want to do, the model systems you want to use, the techniques you wish to learn, sort of the approaches that you see yourself using in the long term. And then you'll want to think a little bit about your work style and your personality. And really self-knowledge is all of these things. What has worked and hasn't worked for me in the past? What can I grow into? What do I not want to grow into? What do I want to learn? What do I want to do day to day? And really, who am I? And there's some good resources I'll give you a link toward to at the end. I really recommend that you journal around this. I think journaling is an amazing tool for self-awareness and resilience. Now, in terms of knowing your options, you start by generating a list. You set up appointments to talk with the PI. Remember that you are selling yourself, but you are also interviewing the PI. And so you'll want to go with questions, not just what experiments in science, but you'll want to know about their view of graduate education, how they mentor, what their expectations are. You're selling yourself, so you want to convince them that you'd be a great rotation student or graduate student, but you're also interviewing them to make sure that they will be a great PI and mentor for you. You want to talk to current and past students, postdocs, and research staff in the group. And you want to ask open-ended and complex questions. You don't want to say things like, how is it? Because people will say fine, right? You want to ask really open-ended questions. Can you tell me what happens when there are disagreements in the group, right? And by complex, I mean, you might ask a question and then go deeper and deeper, right? You really want to get a sense of what the environment is like, a sense of whether it's a team-oriented environment, a sense of how people work together or don't work together, how the PI helps people or doesn't help people solve problems, how available they are, all these really important things. And we tend, for whatever reason, to just focus on the science. But again, this is the biggest decision you're going to make, and you need a full set of data. If you can, you should attend research group meetings because you'll get to see, so how are people given critical input? Is it engaging and energizing, or do people sort of phone it in? Is there even a regular group meeting, right? Do they talk about lab issues and problems and opportunities? Do they talk about seminars together, right? You can really learn a lot. And one tip and one truth, take your time. People get so pressured, they're like, oh, I won't get a slot in that group. Let me just do this quickly. Take your time. Again, this is the most important decision that you will make. And the second is a truth, and that is that you will not likely break the mold. So if you hear that it's a tough environment and a lot of students have left pretty miserable, you're not likely to break the mold. All right, you might, but you are not likely to, at least in my experience, and I've been doing this for 25 plus years now. So a few things that matter, right, in the academic science realm, the research area and the approaches, the funding stability for you and for your science, their mentoring track record, their publication record, the space, right? Do they have space for you? What does the space look like? What is the size and composition of the group? Some students tell me they're really isolated. They're the only grad student all around in a department where there aren't very many grad students. Some people love that, right? So there is no right or wrong. Another thing to think about is their career level. Are they an early assistant professor, in which case they might be at the bench doing experiments with you? Or are they more senior, in which case they might be on a plane in another time zone, emailing you, right? And it's not to say that there's a right or a wrong, but the relationships may be different and the way the lab is run will be different. And so you'll want to think about that. And finally, you'll want to think about their collaborations and their contacts, right? Many students, when I was taking grad students at Chapel Hill, joined because I had collaborations at the UNC Cystic Fibrosis Center, so they could learn more translational work. And some joined because of industry contacts and collaborators, right? At times, we take primary advantage of our PI and secondary advantage of all these collaborators and contacts. So we want to think beyond the projects and approaches to all of these different things. The other thing that really matters is interpersonal issues. And so we'll want to ask questions and pay attention to the labs and the lab head, communication style, temperament, and personality. Like, what is the lab like? Is it formal, informal, open door policy, never available, gruff, warm, open, not open? You'll want to think about the level of involvement in students' projects. Are you going to see them every few months, or can you knock on the door and say, I have a crazy idea, can I talk about it with you? None of us in general like to be micromanaged, but although we think we love to be totally left alone, the honest truth is it's very hard to finish grad school that way. It's hard to do science that way. And in my many years of advising people, I have to say I've heard as many complaints about never getting input as I have about getting too much input. So you'll want to know about their level of involvement. That goes together with their accessibility and approachability, their management style, their motivational technique. And then finally, you want to know a little bit about the lab culture and dynamics. It's not just about the PI, it's about the whole environment and how it feels for you. So there are a lot of things there that you'll want to think about. Now, for people who've been a faculty member for a while, they have a track record, and you can look at their papers and find students that they've published with in the past and reach out. Really good mentors who are thoughtful and appreciate how important fit is, they'll give you the name of people who've left and said, you should talk to these people, right? So if they have a track record, you have the ability to do that. If they don't, it's a brand new PI. How do you get that information? So first of all, you have to accept that it's slightly more limited. You can talk to people that they collaborated with during their postdoc. You can ask them for students that they might have mentored while they were a postdoc. That's one way to get a sense of their track record. but in general, you'll have to spend much more time talking with them and trying to get a sense of how they'd like to structure their lab. You know, when I think about the students who first joined my lab, I think about how much of a special environment that was, because they got to watch me set up, and we set up together, and they taught me and I taught them. And it seemed like this incredible opportunity to be there from the ground up. But as I've gotten more senior and looked at that, I appreciate that they also missed out on some things. And so maybe the answer to all of this is to choose the right person, and then to supplement your mentoring from within your group with mentoring from without your group. So if you choose a senior person, maybe there are some earlier career people who really remember what it's like to get set up and who are getting set up, and you can go and talk with them at times. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer, but you'll want to consider all of these different things. Here is a link to a website off of our website that has a lot of nice questions that you can ask and guides you through some self-assessment. And I'm going to give you some advice whether you want it or not, because I'm in charge here today, so I can. And that is that lots of students who choose wrong ignore warning signs about the environment and group culture, and they focus exclusively on the science. And it just doesn't work. We can go in and be unhappy, or I'll use even a stronger word, we can go in and be miserable for some short period of time if in general we have a stable position and we generally have a lot of self-confidence. But graduate school, even if you have self-confidence, and you do to get there, it will be hit hard through this experience. And none of us can go in day to day and be miserable for 3-4 years at a time. It is just, it's like someone beats the love of science out of you. So those of you who focus exclusively on the science, or the chance to publish in some high tier journal that you've really been focused on, if you focus exclusively on that, there is a chance that you will be burned, and burned badly. And so I encourage you to think a lot about the lab environment and lab culture. You know, there's a whole literature out there, a growing, alarming literature out there about depression and anxiety in the graduate student community beyond the biomedical sciences, but there are important papers coming right out of the biomedical sciences. And one thing that is protective in terms of that is quality mentorship. Students who are in labs where they can be whole people, where they can practice wellness, where they have healthy boundaries, where they can say no to their PI, ask for help from their PI, students in those environments are less depressed and less anxious than students are in harsh, unsupportive environments. And so if you're going to take one take-home message out of this talk, it would be that. So I'm going to pause for a minute and take questions, and I'll start with Catherine's. What are major red flags, and how do you differentiate between situational stress and a red flag? So major red flags. So in systems that are unhealthy, people gossip, right? People take sides, people hide. If people are hiding mistakes from their PI, that's a major red flag. If people are gossiping, it's a major red flag. If people are answering all of your questions without making eye contact and short one sentence, it's fine, it's okay, it's fine, that's a red flag. So those are some major red flags. If lab meetings are hugely awkward, nobody's looking at each other, there's no ease of exchange, that's a red flag. If you never see the PI during your rotation, that's potentially a red flag, depending on whether they have a deputy that you see regularly, a staff scientist or head lab, some research faculty member there. But I think if you never see them, that's a big red flag. They should want to get to know you if they're going to take you into their research group. Situational stress, that's when a PI is a little bit snarky in lab meeting and then apologizes for it. Situational stress is not people getting yelled at in the middle of the lab space. That should never happen. So red flags are regularly seeing a lack of civility, a lack of respect, and a lack of indication that the PI sees everyone in their group as individuals as opposed to hands with keyboards and pipettes. Okay, and if that's not enough, at the end you can ask some more. Is it a good idea to enter the lab at the same time as another graduate student? I can see benefits and drawbacks to both doing this and avoiding this. And you actually, Morgan, answered your question. Yes, it's a good idea. And no, it's not always a good idea. Some of the yeses, there's a peer group, you start together, you're in the exponential learning phase together. In fact, I often took 2 or 3 students at a time, and I think that they really synergized. Not good if you're stumbling over each other to set projects. Not good if you're comparing yourselves to each other so much that it's a negative. Not good if your project is so tied together that you can't both individually grow, shine, and learn. And so it really depends on the scenario, and it is worth, if you're thinking of doing that, to sit and talk with the PI about the projects and making sure that it's a good time for that. The one other thing I'll say about that is sometimes people are great mentors till they take too many people and they don't have time. And so if the lab seems to be really, really in this exponential growth phase of taking lots of new people and there's not a lot of stability, it could be really an unsettled time, right? So there's this theory of organizational team formation of storming, norming, forming. I can't remember it exactly, but you can just Google that and you'll find it. And too many new people is a storm. Everyone's trying to figure things out. So it really depends on the exact situation. What ways would you recommend looking more into potential mentors, contacts, and collaborators outside academia? Nicola, it would be great to ask them. You know, if I stay in your lab, what types of collaborations might I be able to participate in? And then they'll say some things, and you might follow up with a question. You know, some students are really interested in industry, and you want to join a lab that helps with that, right? And has a positive view of that. So if somebody said, you know, you could ask, where have some of your previous students went? And if somebody says, oh, a couple of my students have gone this way, that way, some have gone to industry. Oh, do you have any industry collaborations, right? Those are the kinds of ways to learn about things like that, in that give and take of asking questions. But you can also tell by looking at their publication record, right? And who they publish with. How can you learn to handle disappointment without getting jaded, still allowing yourself to be excited by ideas? Laura, that's probably the million-dollar question for being a scientist. Well, really being a human being in this world, right? Being in a relationship, being a parent, right? Life is a mix of disappointments and happy moments, and somehow we want to hold on to the possibility and happy while being influenced by the negative, you know, and impacted by it, but not driven by it. And I think that goes back to the resilience and wellness that I started with. And I know that's sort of frustrating to hear because it takes a lot of time to take care of yourself and practice wellness. But as you learn how to do it, it becomes such a part of who you are, and you realize that you feel so much better, and you realize it's really worth it. And so I think that we learn to handle disappointment without getting jaded by acknowledging our negative emotions and processing them and talking about them, by looking for the positive around us, by looking at the process, not only the outcome, all the different things I talked about around growth mindsets. What are some tips on dealing with mental stress? You work all day, you're mentally tired, have no energy to do your hobbies or focus on self-care. Yeah, That's a great question, Milan. I talk about that a lot in the resilience workshop that I talked about, that I gave you links to. I guess I would say scheduling it, not always leaving it till the end of the day. So if I wait till the end of the day, I don't exercise, but if I get up early, I do, largely because I'm afraid of Lisa Kiley. So if any of you are at the University of Maryland and bump into her, you'll let her know that. So we have to schedule it. We also have to take small breaks during the day. So right after I finish this, I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk around. I'm going to pet my dog. I'm going to chat with my wife. I think I'm going to text my son. He's in LA, so by now he's probably starting to get up. You know, I'm going to do some things to take care of myself. We have to do wellness in the middle of the day, not just in big boluses at the end, and not just every once in a while. And so the way we find time for this is by acknowledging that we have to do it to do well. So I always tell the students, to do well, we have to be well. Here's a question. After 1 year of being in a lab, I realize it's not a good fit, and I'm in the process of finding a new lab midway through the PhD. What's the first advice? So first of all, let me just acknowledge how brave it is to do that. And also, I have a slide later where I say, if you're miserable, people who change labs do better often than people who stay and suffer. So good on you for doing that. My advice to every student who changes research groups is to spend time processing the disappointment of the change. And there's a little bit of trauma in letting go. There's grief of letting go. I always tell people to find a counselor and talk it through. So go to student health. If you have good insurance and access to therapy in the community, find a therapist who understands science and talk it through. Why? Because changing labs, if you're carrying a big bag of bricks from the first lab, it's not going to work. So you want to leave those heavy bricks behind. I had a student join my lab after being in a lab that was really pretty intense, where there was a lot of screaming and yelling. And although I think at times, well, I could be a very intense mentor. At times I wish I could have been a little bit softer. I certainly didn't stand in the middle of the lab and scream and yell, but sometimes I could give some pretty clear input. And this student, one time when we were talking about a committee meeting and we were going back and forth and it got a little bit intense, he used the other PI's name instead of my name. Like, how's that for proof of carrying around some heavy bricks? And so my advice is to process the move before you actually start somewhere else, and also to get a lot of advice about where you go next. How honest about your mental health and insecurity should you be in a grad school interview or when talking to PIs? It sounds like you need to sell yourself, but that seems to undermine the honesty of our real mental state. So I think that there's appropriate ways to share. I generally encourage trainees to talk first with someone that they can really trust, the director of the graduate program, one of the program administrators, you know, and make it clear, I've struggled some with anxiety and depression in the past, or I've had some struggles in some other labs, and I'll need some help and support, and talk it through with them first. Make sure that you feel comfortable, make sure that you have healthy boundaries, right? We don't need to share all of our struggles. We just need to let people know we're human and this is what we need support in. And then as you get more comfortable with having that discussion, when you talk to a PI, I don't think you really need to talk in any great deal about specifics, but you need to say, I appreciate that graduate school can be very stressful and has its ups and downs, and how do you advise students in your group about dealing with that? And that's a good way to get a little bit of an entree into their view of things, right? And you'll want to ask other people, what's the balance here, right? What's the intensity of work versus having fun doing science versus taking a break? If you feel that you have to share specifics of a medical condition with a PI, you'll want to do that after you've talked with them about other things, and then say, I have something important that I want to share with you. You want to share about it, tell them your thoughts on how you have made it work in the past, and make it clear what you need from them. And it may just be, so I'll need to leave one day a week a little bit early to take care of things. Or it may be, and so if I start seeming a little bit woozy and disconnected, you'll want to make sure that I have something, a snack, right? I've had students tell me I'm a diabetic and I need you to know that, right? I have depression and I need to see a therapist, right? We all have issues, but you want to first establish a relationship and some trust, and you want to get advice before you do that. Somebody loves the term bolus of wellness. Yeah, well, I use that because I think that was my idea for many decades and it didn't work. If I find out that a lab culture involves gossiping and cliques and a lack of respect from a PI, do you have any advice to address this? So first, my advice is don't join that group. If you have any choice, don't join. Go to a group that's civil and respectful and supportive. That doesn't mean every day will be perfect. It never will be. But when a lab culture is civil and respectful and courteous, it goes a long way. And one can find labs that are civil, respectful, and courteous that do stellar science. Many labs like that exist. So if you have the option of not joining, join somewhere else. Accept the disappointment of, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to go there because it's not the right environment. It's more important to find a good environment right now and go somewhere else. If you're already in that group, you want to start talking with the director of your program early about the situation, because it may be that you won't want to stay and you'll want to figure out how you've joined, how to deal with that. So once you've already joined the group, if it doesn't feel right, you want to seek advice as soon as possible, and that is from the director of graduate studies, the program administrators, the people that you really trust. At the very beginning, should I ask experimental details to lab mates or to the PI? I'm afraid to bother the PI, but lab mates could have different experiences. I want to do the right thing. I would say that this is a great discussion to have with the PI. So day to day, who should I go to? And if they say, my door's open, come to me, then you want to get over that barrier and you want to start practicing doing that. And that may be a little bit hard, and you're going to have to ask, am I going too much, right? There's a little bit of never going. If somebody says, come whenever you have a question and you never go, well, they're going to make a judgment from that behavior. On the other hand, if you go too much, they're going to make a judgment from that behavior. When I was in grad school, right at the beginning, I finally, it wasn't going very well my first rotation. I had lunch with 2 senior students, and one of the students, I said, he gave me papers and I just read them, and he never come back to talk to me, and I don't know what to do next. And I've just been waiting and waiting and waiting, and my angst was growing and my catastrophizing, cognitive distortion was growing. And finally, Mary said to me, you might consider talking to him. And it seems so simple, but it was like the key to an incredibly successful rotation in the end. So ask other people in the group, how does this generally work? Ask the PI, ask other people, make sure you're not on either extreme. Would you recommend at least doing a rotation with a PI who has a reputation of being rigorous, intense, if the science is super interesting to you? So first of all, I think rigorous and intense might be fine. The question is it courteous, respectful? Is it rigorous and intense but supportive? And so I would recommend doing a rotation. I would just recommend paying attention to whether that rigor and intensity comes with respect and support. You mentioned supplementing mentorship. throughout grad school. How can someone in a lab with a more junior PI successfully get in contact with more senior investigators? And actually, Rasan, I'm going to generalize this and say, first of all, we all need multiple mentors. Your thesis committee is a source of mentors. Teachers of your classes are sources of mentors. Go to seminars, and if there are cookies beforehand or after, chat with some different PIs. That's how you'll find sources of mentors. Talk to people on your floor when you're waiting on a, you're waiting at the copy machine. Chat with people. The more we talk, the more we find sources of mentors. Now, I said a little bit that even in a good situation, you have to put energy into making this primary relationship work. So discuss expectations, goals, and progress early and often. You need to know what your PI expects of you. They need to know what you expect of them. You all need to be working towards shared goals. You want to define a standard meeting time and a style, and that should be suited to you and your mentor. If your mentor's not really good in the afternoon, flex a little bit and meet with them when they tend to have more time. You have to cultivate relationships with many mentors, and I just talked about that, so I won't talk about it anymore. You want to get involved in training activities on your campus and in the science community, because even if you have a fabulous lab thesis advisor who becomes an amazing mentor, they'll be good at mentoring in some areas but not in others. So you want to have a broader mentoring network, and one way of doing that is through training activities. Or for example, I think that I was a good mentor in many ways, but I wasn't a very good coach around writing. I love to write, but I'm not very good about teaching other people to write. I draw a big circle and say, fix this, right? That's not a whole lot to go on. So people in my lab took a writing course to get around that a little bit, right? And so you want to get involved in training activities to find mentors, but also to develop skills. And then you have to find support to deal with the disappointments that come from tensions with your PI. There will be. They will give feedback that hurts. Or one day it just won't go well. The two of you will really disagree about something, and we just need ways to process all of those disappointments. So that's what I have to say about relationships and finding labs. I want to talk about how isolating it can be as a graduate student, and I want to encourage you to be proactive. And I've talked about a lot of this already, but I think it's important. I want to stress it one more time. First of all, find a way to hold on to one or two of your hobbies. Do not overcommit, right? And choose the things that most nurture and sustain you. So the things that make you feel really good about yourself. It's great when some of those things are group activities, playing music together, joining a running club or playing soccer together, dancing. It's just great if there's some group activities, because that's another way of making friends. And if you're moving to a new area, right, as we're learning now, yes, we can stay in contact with people virtually, but boy, isn't it nice to sit in the same room together. And so you want to make friends in your new place as well. Many campuses have organized activities and student groups. Join them, not too many of them at the outset, right? You want to be able to put a lot of time into your academics, so you have to hit the sweet spot between not doing too much and not doing too little. And then finally, find a graduate student support group or a counselor who knows what it's like, especially if you are really struggling with feelings of being alone on top of feelings of lacking self-confidence, imposter fears, etc. So you can check with student health or counseling services on campus. Also, your director of graduate studies and program administrators often are a good source of referrals. Students are also stressed because they're looking towards the future and worries about jobs and job markets. And we saw that in the question earlier about, is there any chance that we won't get paid in the fall if we can't open, right? We are always, it's interesting because mindfulness is being in the present with how we feel. The honest truth is, for the most part, we are in the past ruminating about what happened, or in the future worrying about what's going to happen. And graduate students worry a lot about jobs and job markets. And so first of all, I want to say two things. The first is that your career choices will change and change and change again. and you should be open to that and welcome that. And the second thing is that you don't have to choose a career for someone else. So I know there's still all of this both conscious and unconscious bias about career paths in the biomedical sciences, right? I know that we all think our PI only wants us to be a PI, and that there's no room for people who have an interest in doing research in industry, in science policy, in teaching, in science writing, etc. The honest truth is that this is partially an old remnant and partially the fact that some people are loud and vocal about their biases, but there is a growing, large community of people who embrace the idea that graduate students should follow the career path that most excites them. And that's why I think career planning should start now. I think that it should start now because the more we get comfortable with how to explore careers and how to have the career we want, and how to ignore the chatter and background of unconscious and conscious bias, the more we learn how to do all that, the more likely it is that we will have the career that we want. So career planning starts at the beginning of grad school because it provides focus and structure to a process that can seem endless and unstructured. And I don't mean you're reading ads and applying now, right? You have a long time for that. I mean, you're going to workshops, developing your networking skills, learning about the various career paths in science. It can help you prioritize your graduate school time. If you think, wow, I really love to teach, right? And I'm gonna get a job eventually putting my love of teaching to work, well, then you can prioritize some of your graduate school time and take a teaching course when you have some flexibility. Or if you think I'd really love to start my own company and be entrepreneurial in the industry side of science, you might choose a lab where there are some industry connections, right? Or you might sign up at the graduate school for a 2-day industry boot camp. It can help you prioritize your time. It can also help you choose research directions, and it can help you make better postdoc choices. So I am not advocating that you start deciding exactly what you want to do from day one. I'm advocating that you get involved in the career planning process at your school, that you go to workshops, that you meet the career staff, that you go to different lunches with seminar speakers to ask them about their career paths. If you notice, the element of career planning looks a whole lot like choosing a lab. Knowing yourself and identifying your options. We build credentials and we make connections eventually, and this is a long time down the road for you. So you're just focusing on the knowing yourself and learning about options, building credentials and making connections. For you, you're at the bottom here. Eventually, you're going to move up towards a job search and job career moving forward, right? But for now, it's knowing yourself, identifying options, and building networks. So attend career development workshops, network, present posters and talks whenever possible, because you never know who you're meeting at those different events. Also, you are developing the most transferable skill of all, your communication skills. Mentor undergraduates or summer interns. Do this at the right time, not in year one, maybe not in year two, although year two, depending, might be an okay time, but in year 3 and 4, you want to really be getting involved in this. And you want to think about all sections of your CV and resume, right? Honors and awards. So apply for travel awards from your grad school, right? Or apply to the scientific society to the meeting you're going to go to, right? You want to have some things under leadership. Volunteer 1 year to be the student liaison to the interview committee. So these are career steps that you can take at the beginning. And so I'm going to do the last one here about angst, and then we'll take some more questions, and that is concerns regarding work-life integration. And if you notice, I did not use the word work-life balance. I think that that sets us up for failure. Like, balance implies that we're always perfectly doing, we can have everything all the time. Well, we can't. And sometimes we have to work really hard, and sometimes something happens in our life, and as much as we'd like to work, we have to attend to that. And sometimes we're moving back and forth between the two with this ease. And that's why I like to use the word integration. All of that is really about managing priorities, goals, and time. And I started already earlier by saying self-awareness is a big part of this. So knowing yourself is the first step. How do we manage time? What are our time management blind spots? There's a whole lot about knowing ourselves, about what matters to us the most. We have to accept the trade-offs. And the thing is that we can't be guilty. So if we decide I'm going to run to take care of myself, we can't run and be guilty that we're not in lab. And then when we miss a couple days of running, we can't be in lab saying, damn, I missed that. Now I'm going to get behind and I'm not going to be ready for my marathon. Like, we have to just be in the moment where we are, and we have to accept that there are trade-offs. If you did your homework well, you found a research group that accepts that there are trade-offs and who supports you in all of that. We cannot manage our priorities and goals or time unless we sleep well, eat well, and find time for ourselves. We have to learn how to set goals. We have to learn how to say no, and we have to learn where we waste our time. So in the resilience workshop that's taped, pandemic edition, I talk a little bit about finding our flow and looking at our time management, and you'll want to take a look at that or find another time management workshop. This is not just about time management, it's really about knowing yourself and setting priorities. And I think that's an incredibly important part of integrating work and life. We have to know what's most important to us. These things in my family come first, right? And then we have to make sure that our science and our lab and our academics fit within those things. And sometimes we're going to pull a little bit from one to give extra to the other. And how we do that is very, very much about how we see our priorities and our goals. So I want to wrap up by going back to something that happened a long time ago called the Sigma Xi postdoc survey. And I know that this was about postdocs, but it really applies, I think, to graduate students as well. And they did a survey of lots and lots and lots of postdocs. And what they found, they were looking for things that correlated with better outcomes. And what they found was that fellows and mentors who meet at the outset and set goals and define expectations have better outcomes. And fellows who have access and attend career development and professional development activities have better outcomes. Two things correlated with better outcomes. Two things: that you're all on the same page about goals and expectations, and that fellows get out of the lab and go to career and professional development activities. And by better outcomes, they meant they looked at more papers, more grants submitted, fewer conflicts with their mentors, and higher overall satisfaction. Those are important data to look at and to listen to and to hear. And then I'm going to tell you not what I learned from the Sigma Xi postdoc survey, but what I've learned from doing this work for 25 plus years. I'm starting to get old. If you could see me, you'd see there's actually some gray. Students can avoid problems by choosing their thesis advisor wisely, and I can't stress that enough. And then beyond that, you can often fix problems by communicating with your mentor. Students who get a lot of mentoring and guidance from their committee members and program directors often do better. And if things don't improve, students who change labs do better than students who stay and are miserable. Those four go together. Choose wisely at the beginning, get help along the way, and if you made a mistake, get the hell out of Dodge if you can. Two other things. Most mentors, even the good ones, don't spend enough time thinking about their students' career and professional development needs. We are incredibly busy and stressed ourselves. And even if we spend time thinking, we're not experts in career development, which means you have to be proactive in taking care of your career and professional development, engaging your mentor, but taking care of it yourself. And that means knowing your director of graduate studies, going to your postdoc and graduate student career office activities, engaging in national meetings, partially in the career development offerings, etc. And then finally, students who fall off the radar and become isolated are at great risk, especially if you are in a really difficult environment. Science is not working and you're not being supported through that. Do not fall off the radar. So I just want to tell a story to wrap up. And I think some of you probably know Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, which is a great childhood book. I had a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day early at the start of my graduate career where I made a mistake. I was making gradient gels to run protein gels. And so I had to mix the catalyst together with the acrylamide. And it had to go, I had to set it up within 2 mixing chambers, and that led towards tubes. It helps a lot if I can show you, but since I can't do that today, you'll just have to imagine. And anyway, like I said, math, I'm not so good at yet. It's always been a little bit of a challenge, but back then it was a big challenge. And I thought I made a 1 millimolar stock, but I made a 1 molar stock. So you can imagine I added in the catalyst to lead to polymerization of the gel, and it was 1,000 times too strong, and it went like instantly towards, the room got hot, the beaker started bubbling over, and then the tubes went splat and they broke open and acrylamide flew across the room, and I swear it actually hit my rotation advisor's bald head, I swear. So there will be bumps along the way, okay? And here I am, many, many years later, absolutely fine, having had a career with lots of bumps, but also lots of ups. Many of us don't pass our qualifying exams the first time. Our first committee meeting doesn't go as well as we had hoped. Our papers get rejected. Our committees say, no, not yet. Graduate school is full of ups and downs and bumps along the way. And it does sometimes feel like you're having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. But here's the thing, after that, my advisor and I, we cleaned up the mess. I practiced math calculations for a little bit. There was no internet. I couldn't go and watch online at Khan Academy. Now that's probably what I would do right away. But I went to the library and got a book on lab math. There will be many terrible, horrible, no good, very bad days. You will hit the disillusioned learner phase, right? We won't be the enthusiastic beginner anymore. And if you notice, what do you need when you hit the disillusioned learner phase? You need support. And that's what this talk is really about. If you notice, most of the skills for success here that I've talked about are the skills of accepting that we're human, accepting that we make mistakes, and accepting that we need help. And I know we have to do that within an environment that sends a message that that's not the case, that you're supposed to just be good at this, and that we expect perfection. And the culture of science is changing. It has to keep changing. You're a part of that change. But success in graduate school is really embracing that concept. Here are some other videos that I'd like to encourage you to watch, especially the first one. This is thoughts on the graduate and professional school experience. It is from first generation graduate students, students of color, students from the LGBT and the differentially abled community, talking about their graduate school experience. And I think that it has a beautiful message for everyone. And that is that we all want to fit in, and we all want to feel that we belong, and we all have to search out our support system. So I really encourage you. It's one of the most thought-provoking videos that I've seen in a long time. The Finding Your Research Home is my thoughts about finding a thesis advisor or a place to do a postdoc, grad school or postbac. And then Establishing and Maintaining Networks is about networking. I'm going to take questions. We're going to wrap up actually exactly on time. If you are a current NIH postbac, I hope to see you at virtual postbac poster day. Please join the OIT alumni database before you leave, and I think we probably will send out the postbac survey soon. If you are not at NIH, I attend many national meetings for workshops and seminars. Come by and say hi. Visit our website. You can follow me on Twitter at Sharon Milgram or at NIH_OITE. Keep in touch, and I am really happy to keep taking questions. I know some of you will likely need to go, but I will continue taking questions. So with that, let me just pause again for a moment and acknowledge just the amazingly difficult time that we are now in. And I know that it's probably hard to look towards the future with any kind of optimism, but I truly believe that we will get through this together, and that there are many, many people at your schools and in your communities that want to provide support right now. So I wish you all the best, and I'll start with questions now, and we'll go until I get through them all. Any tips on advocating for yourself and work-life balance? I feel that hobbies can be looked down upon by those that are involved. Look down upon that you're less dedicated to science. You know, again, a lot of this has to do with engaging with the right people, because I go all over the country, I talk about this, and there are people in every audience hungry to acknowledge that we need balance in our lives. So we need to find mentors that support that. So whether you're already rotating or just getting ready to move, when you're looking for research groups, get a sense of the work-life integration, get a sense of whether people work hard and find time to play. You know, we're not saying self-care and nothing else. We're saying self-care and excellent science. And you can advocate for that by asking questions about it, by talking about it with people, and by choosing balance over a lack of balance. How honest should you be if you don't, at your interview, if you don't want a career in academia or a little unsure about what you want to do? You know, I think even if we think we want a career in something, it usually changes. There's some data out of, well, it was the first author is Cynthia Furman. It was when she was at UCSF, and it's a great paper showing that in the first year, graduate students change their mind. And I know a lot of people change their mind. They say, oh, I thought I wanted to be a PI and now I don't want to. But it's also true that people change the other way. I think that you should be open and say, I am open to learning about a variety of career paths. I know I love research. I'm not sure what I want to do about it. You know, if a school doesn't offer career workshops and if students aren't talking about all of the different career paths, then it's not really the best of graduate programs. Because we know that the career trajectory of our graduates is in a variety of areas, and we need to support students in all those areas. And you know, there is no such thing as an alternative career. It's a stupid word. It's just a career. All right, it's really just a career. All right, somebody tells me the links are all broken, but searching the title seems to pull up the videos. I will fix the links before I send this out. Thank you for that. Usually I check links before I reuse slides, but I was in meetings up until I started, and I apologize for that. Thank you. You are welcome. You are welcome. YouTube videos. Okay, so there's a lot of URL problems. All right, I will fix all of the URL problems. Are there other questions before we hang up? And Teo is coming back. He went outside for a little bit, so he'll be back in marketing in a minute. Any questions, anybody? All right, 3, 2, 1. If not, please take care of yourselves. I know that there are many holidays coming up later this week. So for all of you who celebrate those various holidays, wishing you happy holidays, and all of you stay safe and wash your hands and stay at home.